Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go through a really interesting little piece of history today. We're going to look at some of the run-up to Mariella Novotny, becoming Mariella Novotny. What she was before was Stella Marie Capes, when she was born, to a woman called Constance Cape. Constance Capes was born in 1903 in Grimsby in North England. And Mariella Novotny changed her last name to Novotny, claiming that she was related to the Czech leader of the same last name. There was no evidence of that, but some people said it was just rubbish. But her mother did have this intriguing upbringing. She seemed like a very prim and proper girl until she came across this fraudster, and his name was Atherley. Or was it? No, I don't think it was. Well, we'll find out today. Let's find out some of the stories that you don't know about the Profumo Affair, some of the history you don't know about the people who existed in the past and did strange things. Let's do the news. Well, my people, I'm so glad that you could join me today, and I'm going to go straight into it. We're still on the Black Hand series. We're on episode 4, and it's really interesting. The first two, the first 3, sorry, were really different articles. This one is each of them have got their own charm, because I'm kind of like, this is written as I'm investigating, as I'm going through these things in an order that makes sense. So the first one was about Esmeralda Gulen. Second one was about all the nightclub girls that died after Esmeralda Gulen died. The third one was about Horace Dibben, an introduction to the man Horace Dibben, and his relationship with Andre Gabor Tiem Bozomeni, the devil himself. And then this one's called A Match Made in Hell. Number 4 is called A Match Made in Hell. And it really starts to look at Mariella Novotny. Now, I choose to call her, throughout this NEWSHOUND and throughout this article, I call her Mariella Capes. That's the name that she used before she fell under Horace Dibben's spell. So when Horace Dibben finally made her into Mariella Novotny and whatever she wanted to be, she'd lived before that by Mariella Capes mainly. And that was her first initial stage name, maybe, but it's where a lot of the source material and what I find repeated. She went by multiple names, not only Mariella Novotny or Mariella Capes or Stella Marie Capes or Marie Capes. She also went by the name Henrietta Chapman. And there was a couple others as well. When she was smuggled out of the USA by a coordinated effort between the FBI and CIA, she went by another name when she was on the ship as well. And later on, she'd go by the name Chapman Dibben, I believe. That's right. Yeah. So that's when they're trying to remain in hiding. She's literally in court denying who she is. It's quite amazing. And eventually, this girl, who we're going to follow the story of now, is going to drown in jelly. She's going to drown in jelly, people. You can't stop this happening. She a dead girl. She's already dead. And to be perfectly honest, anyone around for what she was dealing with, who she was dealing with, and the secret she knew, the trouble that she had put people through, a lot of people would have expected her to die. Officially, it was an overdose, and she was found drowned in a plate of jelly. Took an overdose, collapsed into a plate of jelly eventually, sucked it up, couldn't breathe, died. You believe that? I don't believe that. And this is what you find about everything related to Horace Dibben, Mariella Capes, Henrietta Chapman. This is what you find about them. There's so much more there. There's a life they led, the life they thought they would lead, and the life they got. And that's like everybody, you know? Everybody gets this mix of stuff happen to them in life that molds them and makes them into who they are. And so let me try and be one of the first to kind of posit, because before now, Constance Capes, Mariella Novotny's mum, isn't really noted much. Some of the other girl, Christine Keeler, one of the other girls in the Profumo Affair, who sold the story to the paper and all, she was. She said that Mariella called her mother a whore, or that she called Mariella's mother a whore. Basically, she said, insinuated she was a woman of loose morals, but that could mean anything in the 60s, couldn't it? Whore could mean anything. She showed a bit too much of her breast. Whore! She showed too much of her knee. Whore! That was the 60s as it was. So it's not a surprise to hear that. But there was not much else known about her, and I did track down a story that no one else knew, and it made a lot of sense, and it mirrors things that were within this case, and I thought it was necessary in this series. I really want to start to put the full story together of this period, this era. I don't want to just tell the same story. I never do this. I never tell the same story that everybody else has told over and over again. I try and find the pieces that have been lost in time, missing, purposely pushed away, hidden, and they're out there. There's a lot of information out there. And once these people cover up these things, they get on with their own stuff. So they're not expecting people to go back necessarily and take a proper look and think about things like through different perspective of time, and knowing the entire case. So I can find things that they didn't think when they were covering this up that people like me were going to be able to find, because they can't think of all of those things. What is it someone in the future is going to be able to work out about now? Oh, I don't know. Let's just cover up the main things and then let's just deny all knowledge. That's how the intelligence services tend to work. That's how history tends to work. And so I went through a trek through time, and I found this really exciting, interesting story. It's really interesting. So even though in the article about near the end I start talking about Stephen Ward, Teddy Sugden, and other of the society people hanging around helping out the establishment with their nefarious sexual deeds. Stephen Ward, for those who don't know, eventually died in custody of an overdose. Another one, yes, another one. Was a central figure in the Profumo Affair, ended up in court. He was seen by many as a scapegoat. I think he was just one. He was just surfing. He thought he was cool. He thought he was, I think Douglas Thompson said Belmondo chic or whatever, he thought he was the best, wearing sunglasses and nighttime in a nightclub. These guys were all obvious spies. These were guys who were working with lots of people who would tell them lots of secrets, and then they would go back and report it to other people, and we're not meant to know about all of this. We're not meant to see all of this. So Stephen Ward was obscured in time, but he was what we use class as a society osteopath. So he was an osteopath, but for people within the establishment and the elite, and he also sketched people in the establishment elite, including the Duke of Edinburgh and other very famous people who at the time were being naughty people themselves and hanging around with these naughty people. Teddy Sugden, who I mentioned, who I talk about a little bit in it, who had a sexual peccadillo for what I call a serpentine peccadillo for lizards. He liked reptiles, Anyway, these guys, I'm not going to cover them so much in this NEWSHOUND. We're going to get onto those guys much more later. We're going to get a gist of the Hod Dibben and Mariella and Novotny sex parties. But we're going to understand this girl, Mariella Capes, a bit more. We're going to understand her mother, and we're going to understand some of the things that led her to become the woman she was, which was a fascinating woman who eventually drowned in jelly. So please, with that, come with me on this adventure through space and time as we explore the very depths of history in NEWSHOUND. This is it. This is where I look for my glasses. Now I'm on my Spare pairs of glasses because I lose my glasses all the time. That's what I do. I put them down somewhere. So if I look suspiciously like I'm from the 60s, hey, well, that's because of these. Most people will probably say, just a little pair of glasses, stop moaning about it, would you? Okay, anyway, so we start in 1903. This is Birth, Marriages and Deaths. freebmd.org.uk, and freebmd allows you to see birth, marriage and death records in the UK. Maybe it's just in England and Wales. Maybe a couple of things in Scotland, I don't know. But I seem to remember that they don't have them in certain areas. It only covers very limited areas, but those limited areas include England and Wales. So I'm probably on here. This is a really good search tool for finding out things. So, no, that's not what I meant to do at all. So if I did want to search myself, I say, oh, no, I can't see because my glowing keyboard isn't glowing. There you go. So if I wanted to find myself, John Vedmore, and I wanted to search for all, and I wanted to know about what I've been doing in the past. What has this naughty boy been doing in the past? Me wonders. Bet something naughty. Oh, and there I am in 1839. Oh, no, there I am later. Oh, no, 1888. Oh, yeah, see, so it goes through all of this, and eventually you get down to the bottom where the records run out. You find me. There you go. John Oliver Lewis Vedmore. There shows you the maiden name there. So my mum's maiden name is Taz. There you go. Born in South Glamorgan, that's me. Yeah. And it was birth June 1980. Well, that's not quite right. What it is, April, March, June. It splits into 3 sections. They basically do it like that, every 3 months. And it's easy to be able to find people's information on here, basic information. So that's what I've done here with Constance Capes. I found Constance Capes. Now there's 2 Constance Capes born around the same time. The reason why I've assumed it's this Constance Capes, is because she was born in Grimsby and this one's born in Croydon. Croydon is down London way. It's in Essex, I think, so it's probably northeast London or something like that. And basically Croydon is far away from where Constance Capes grew up. Grimsby is right around the corner from where Constance Capes grew up. Constance Capes was born around this time, but I wasn't sure about when. So it could have been a 1901 one, but it's not. Also, if you look at Mariella Novotny, she's born in 1940, May 1940, I believe. So you add that up, and Constance Capes would have been basically in her late 30s, but you're basically getting near to 40. It's more likely with this Constance Capes, it's more likely that you're going to be just a bit younger. And so this is her mother. More likely than not, this is her mother, and all the other information indicates that. So this is something where you say you're using different points of information, different points of data to like try and build up a bigger picture. Sometimes that one piece of data on her own, if I only had this, I wouldn't necessarily know which one she was. Was she this one or was she this one? But I also know that she grew up in the north of England. Suggests this. I know that she was had a baby in 1940. Suggests her there more likely than her. I know there's not much of a difference, but there is quite a big drop off in the ability to have kids, especially in the olden days when you get to your late 30s and early 40s. I think you all know this, but I'm sure there's some deniers of facts out there, you bastards. And here we're going to start. Where are we going to start? We're going to start the Daily Mirror. This looks old, doesn't it? Yeah. October the 5th, 1927. So work it out, folks. This girl is a nice young, about 24-year-old. We'll find out if it's her. Maybe it's not. And I'll look like a fool. Can you imagine if I look like a fool? Probably be a lot like how I look anyway. So, page 2 of the Daily Mirror, and we got the mystery of Mr. Afferley. Four Winds owner threatens to sue Daily Mirror, sorry. Typist's story. Left when asked to sign a dying man letter. Right. Interesting, eh? The mystery of Mr. Afferley. And why we're going here is because this mystery will give clues, like I say, will give clues to Mariella and why she had so many names. Most likely. Because people get ideas from things they've experienced and things their family have told them, and things their family experienced. So you'll be the judge of this. You'll be the one who decides, do you think this is something that can lead to that? Is this a gateway to what I'm explaining? You'll be able to tell this once you've got all the information, which is what we do. We bring you all the information, we stuff it all together, we think about it, and then we can look at it logically from loads of different angles, work out what's fallacies or not, work out what our thinking is, work out logically, mash it all together into a true story. That's what we want to see. So here we go. Remarkable communications have been received by the Daily Mirror as a result of recent exclusive articles regarding the mysterious personalities of Mr. Reginald Winterburn Afferley. It will be remembered that Mr. Afferley offered Captain Shipwright, the ex-MP, lucrative employment at Four Winds, a caravan at first. Captain Shipwright declined this. Mr. Afferley later asked the Daily Mirror for a poster, describing him as the super publicity expert. The refusal of this has been followed by the threat of legal proceedings. So he's threatened legal proceedings against the Daily Mirror, which is, of course, quite funny if you know the entire story. And there is more to this story than meets the eye. I'm having trouble. So, in that article, you heard it mentioned. So, in that article, you heard it mentioned about a man named Captain Shipwright. Here he is. This is Captain Shipwright. I'm going to give you a bit of the lowdown about Captain D. Shipwright, Dennis Shipwright. He's got a longer name than that. His name's quite impressive. He was an ex-MP. He would take a job for £4 a week, it says here. Former twin baby of House, who holds Great War record from our social correspondent. And here it goes on about how this guy, basically, Captain Dennis Shipwright, a soldier, airman, barrister, racing motorist, film producer, film actor, business ambassador, big game hunter, and politician, is at 29 years of age desperately anxious to find employment. I will take any job of any sort, he said today. I'm not so much concerned with the remuneration. I would take a chauffeur's job if it were offered. If a man said, I will give you a job at £4 a week tomorrow, I would take it. I believe a young man ought to be ready to do anything. So this came out in September 1927. Captain Shipwright started making these pleas. Out of a job, Captain Shipwright is searching for a job. This, boom, boom, boom. Captain Shipwright, ex-MP for Penryn Falmouth. That's in Penryn and Falmouth is in Cornwall. Is advertising for a job. The following appeared in Friday in the personal column of London newspapers. Ex-MB, age 29, cannot get work. So it goes on about this guy not being able to get work. Ex-MPs appeal for jobs. So Dennis Shipwright is appealed for a job. And someone answers his call eventually, as we see here. Four Winds caravan at first, Captain Shipwright declined this. So Captain Shipwright, who said, I will accept any job of any kind, gets called up by this Mr. Afferley and gets offered a job and he declines it. What could possibly be wrong? You know, why would he do that? Why would he say he would do that? And let's find out. Dying man tale. Why typist would not stay at Four Winds Caravan, strange letter. When Captain Shipwright arrived at Firsk, he found that Four Winds was not a caravan and that Mr. Atherley's offer did not indicate continuity of employment. Mr. Atherley has since visited the Daily Mirror and asked to be printed for use on his car radiator the following poster. Here he is, the mysterious Mr. A of the Daily Mirror fame, the super publicity expert, the idea merchant. Not many hours after this amazing request was refused, the Daily Mail received a letter from Mr. Atherley's solicitor with demand for apology for the recent articles and, failing that, a threat to take proceedings for libel. Curiously enough, Mr. Atherley stated a few days ago that he was delighted with the publicity he had received. Two statements printed below throw interesting new light upon the strange personality of Mr. Atherley. Two names. Here we go. This is Mariella Cape's mum, Constance Capes. This is really interesting. North Country, Grimsby Way. So the only two on the record that we could find. One in Grimsby and one in Croydon. And we know that Mariella Novotny, Mariella Capes, she grew up that way. And this was her mum's name. So we can pretty much assume that this is Constance Capes. She's the right age, 1927. She'll be about 24 years old. Miss Constance Capes, a pretty North Country typist, had several strange experiences while she was acting as Mr. Atherley's secretary at Four Winds Caravan, Firsk. In a statement to the Daily Mirror, she said, "I came to Firsk in reply to a number of letters from Mr. Atherley. The salary he proposed was small, but he said he would give me shares in his business. I knew that Four Winds was a caravan, but I did not know it was his permanent headquarters. After I had worked for 4 days with Mr. Atherley at Four Winds, I felt compelled to leave. In the first place, it seemed a little too much to expect a typist to work by day and sometimes by night in a caravan situated in a field far from town. When I had been at Four Winds for 2 days, a curious incident occurred, which made me doubtful. It was on Sunday, September 18th, when Mr. Atherley came to my lodgings and told me that he had seriously injured a man with his car." No, I thought that said ear. So, I was about to say ear. He had seriously injured a man with his ear. He urged me to return to the caravan, which I did. At Four Winds, he got me to type a letter to a woman in Southport stating that Mr. Winterburn was dying, and if she wished to send him a message, it would be delivered to him on regaining consciousness. I then received an amazing request to sign the letter as Mr. Winterburn's private secretary. I must explain that Mr. Atherley sometimes called himself Mr. Winterburn. Glad to be away. On the Tuesday, he astonished me by asking me to sign one of his letters for him. I told him that I could not put my name to some of his correspondence, and remarked that I thought I had better leave. In consequence of this, I left his service the same day. Of course, I received no salary, but I was glad to be away from Four Winds. Although I was in need of a job, I think I acted for the best in leaving, and I'm sure every typist would have done the same. Mr. E.T. Stead, a motor car dealer at Firsk, told Daily Mirror that he gave the order to Mr. Atherley for erecting four road signs. Mr. Stead said, "I signed a contract because Mr. Atherley gave me the understanding that he was working in conjunction with the Royal Automobile Club. After I had paid £47, I waited for the signs to be erected, but nothing has been done, although a month has elapsed. Mr. Atherley told me he had gone to 4 sites on the main road outside Firsk, and that the signs would be up in 6 weeks. I have no reason to believe that he will not carry out his side of the contract, but if nothing is done in 6 weeks, I shall take steps to recover the money." Mr. Atherley has told Mr. Stead on the telephone that he is returning to Firsk from Prince's Risborough and will execute the order. That's it. Constance Capes goes and she works on this Four Winds caravan site for this guy, Mr. Affley, or also goes by the name Mr. Winterburn. And there's a big hoo-ha about this. People are like, who is this? What is going on? And this guy, Dennis Shipwright, who's an MP who's looking for a job publicly. He's like saying, I need a job. I have worked as an MP, a British soldier. I'm a barrister. I'm a this, that, the other. Wop, 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 wop. Dennis Shipwright, quite an amazing character. Shipwright was a pilot, was noted for his sense of humor, and was said to have a devil-may-care attitude. He was wounded and crashed while flying a mission around the Somme. He was promoted from through ranks, becoming a temporary second lieutenant in the Royal RFC on 5th of July 1917. And he seems like a really interesting character in himself, this guy. Seems like a very interesting character. But I think this was a bit of propaganda. Whatever MP he was, party MP he was for, he's saying, I can't find a job. And I bet you the other party who they were fighting against were in power at the time. And it was a statement about not being able to find a job, even though he was looking. So all of these, I'm out of work, it seemed to be about that. In my opinion, that's what I think they'd be about. But then he gets this mysterious summons to Yorkshire. Captain Dennis Shipwright. And this is a very interesting little bit. This is in The Cornishman on the 28th of September 1927, which is the same day that one of the previous articles shows him applying for a job, asking for jobs. Mysterious summons to Yorkshire. An amazing adventure has befallen Captain D. Shipwright, the ex-MP who recently advertised for a job. In response to several telegrams signed Mr. Affley, giving the address as Four Winds First and suggesting lucrative employment, Captain Shipwright went to Yorkshire. After a long tramp in heavy rain, he accidentally found a caravan, hearing the name Four Winds in the field. But no, bearing the name Four Winds in a field. But no one replied to his knocking. When he entered the train for home, he was hailed by a man with an American accent who became angry when he asked to pay Captain Shipwright's expenses. In the meantime, Captain Shipwright received a number of offers to work, but Mr. Affley wired so persistently he decided to travel to Firsk. Well, anyway, this is very interesting, isn't it? This is Reginald Winterburn, a.k.a. alias Affley. A month later, he finds himself noted in the Cheltenham Chronicle and Gloucestershire Graphic. I loved how they had these really long names for their newspapers back in the day. Under a section, Reginald Winterburn, convicted for assault and posing as a police officer, heckles the magistrates and their clerk, him in dock. I find this guy funny. So this guy is the guy that Constance Capes went to work for, Mariella Capes' mother, and he's a fraudster. He's over the top fraudster. He's completely off his rocker fraudster. I love him. I find him very good. Yes, okay, he assaults a woman. But I'm not sure how that's happened. Let's find out. Shall we find out how he assaults a woman? And I'm sorry if anybody's like, well, I can't accept that. Beatrice Gray was a good woman. Reginald Winterburn, alias Affley, formerly of Cheltenham, was sentenced on 4 charges at a special court of Prince Risborough on Monday. Thus ended the latest exploit of the man who's described himself as Mysterious Mr. Affley, the super publicity expert. Winterburn's charges of theft against Beatrice Gray was dismissed. The chairman of the magistrate said that there was not a stain on her character. This was not a stain on her character. In addition to a charge of assault on Beatrice Gray, Winterburn was convicted for impersonating the police, doing malicious damage to a police cell in High Wycombe, probably smearing, and obtaining a motor driving license when he had previously been disqualified from driving. On the charge of misrepresentation, he was fined £10 or a month's imprisonment. For the assault, he was sentenced to 2 months' hard labour, and for the motoring offence, he was fined £20 or a month's imprisonment. The term of imprisonment to run concurrently. Winterburn appeared in the court wearing a grey suit and patent leather shoes. Ooh, how nice. He conducted his own defense, and during his cross-examination, he removed his coat, revealing a pink shirt and leather jerkin. Ooh, even nicer. A leather jerkin, you say? He drank 10 glasses of water. And as he drank the 10th glass, he informed the court that he was like a steam engine and that it was necessary for him to keep steam up. He heckled the magistrates and the clerk of the court so often that he was twice sternly warned that unless he desisted, he would be committed for contempt. When the magistrates retired to consider their decision, Winterburn offered to read his life's history to the court and then began to sing a hymn, Lead Kindly Light. After he had been convicted, the deputy chief constable of Bucks revealed the fact that Winterburn had previously been convicted and imprisoned for perjury, forgery, criminal libel, and a number of minor offences. No, really. Winterburn's amazing hoax of Captain Shipwright, the ex-MP, focused attention upon Winterburn. His further exploits were recorded, and scores of people wrote telling of their dealings with him and asked that he should be exposed. Winterburn left the court shouting, "I will appeal!" But he was hustled away and shortly after removed to Oxford jail. The charges against Winterburn of impersonating the police on the telephone had unusual features. Mr. G. Kirby, the deputy chief constable in prosecuting, stated that the case was extremely serious in the views of modern use of the telephone in police work. Oh, yeah, okay. During the early part of the present month, Winterburn resided at Monk's Risborough. On October the 4th, he telephoned to New Scotland Yard, giving his own name, and asked for someone who he described to be arrested. 2 days later, Winterburn telephoned Marylebone Police Station, representing that he was the Risborough Police, and gave a description of the person and asked for her arrest. Later the same day, he telephoned to Scotland Yard, gave a description of the same person, and asked a search to be made. On October the 7th, he telephoned to Bedford Police, representing himself to be Risborough Police, and asked for a woman to be arrested. Later the same day, he again telephoned Bedford, and on that occasion stated that he was a police sergeant at Risborough. The woman was arrested and taken to Bedford Police Station on his information. Evidence of Winterburn's misrepresentation on the telephone was given by Scotland Yard detectives and police officers from London and Bedford. All these officials were cross-examined by Winterburn. Oh, Winterburn. Mr. Winterburn's You Make Me Laugh indeed. So he was a boy, wasn't he? I love these old papers. Some of the articles you can find is probably quite good. Up here there's just lots about they'd be useful for homesteading. Well, anyway, let's go on, shall we? So it would be a long time until Constance Cates, another 13 years until Constance Cates really comes up in the news again. When she comes up in the wedding of her sister, bouquet sold, whole wedding aid for war charities. After the wedding on Saturday, a Miss Alice Dorothy Capes of Hull and Mr. Gilbert Lomas of Moseley, the bouquets of the brides and bridesmaids were sold to the guests for war charities. Money from the bride's bouquet was given to the Lord Mayor's Spitfire Fund, and the bridesmaids' bouquet raised money for the Southwest Hull Townswomen's Guild Woolen Comforts Fund. Anyway, so they talk about the bride and groom, and it's notes down here. Given away by her father, the bride wore a pale blue moose crepe cut on princess lines with navy accessories, and she carried a bouquet of Ophelia roses. Attending her was Miss Constance Capes, sister of the bride, who married a bouquet of anemones to tone with her dress, and the previous and matching accessories with deep clover shade. So there she's mentioned. Now what I find interesting, let me uh, indulge my conspiratorial side for a bit, won't you? Please indulge it. Will you indulge my conspiratorial side, please? Well, this uh, report of a wedding. It's reporting a wedding that happened 8 months later, not 9 months, but we can have premature births. I mean, coming a little bit early is known. Mariella is born. Constance Capes attends this wedding of her sister, and Mariella is born, and her father is not known. Was this one of the occasions where she might have or was she already pregnant? She was either already pregnant when she was at her sister's wedding, or that's what got her and she got pregnant. And lots of claims are made, but who really knows? And the next time Constance Case mentioned is 1961 then, so that goes another 21 years. And what was she? Girl witness arrives with no passport, Mariella Novotny. Talking about Mariella Capes, but by now they call them Mariella Novotny. And there you go. She was allowed to land after Home Office ruling that she was a British subject. She was entered onto the line of passenger list as Mrs. R. Tyson. Very interesting that. Very interesting that. Her mother, Mrs. Constance Capes, and her husband, Mr. Hod Dibben, an antiques dealer, greeted her and they drove off to London. There you go. There you go. So that's the next time Constance Capes mentioned. So we should probably say by that time, that's 1961. And here we go. Should we have a little look? We're in January the 30th, 1958. And we're going to go on through the story here. French Review set for the West End, and this is in The Stage, the variety section of The Stage magazine. A Quelle Folie, the most recent Folie Bergère review in Paris, is to be given a West End season in the spring. Jules Borken, representing the owner of the world rights for the Folie Bergère, has announced in Paris that he has arranged with James Lorry to present the lavish spectacle in London. Michael Gimafi, who has staged all the Folie Bergère shows for many years, will come to London to direct the West End production. In addition to the stars of Paris production, 2 British artists will be engaged to supplement those parts, which no amount of skillful translation from French can overcome. Rehearsals will start during the last week of March. And this is big for some girls, isn't it? This is big. This is a French review. Now, what you might not know about one of these little French reviews is that in France, it's just loads of nudity. It's an excuse for rich enough people, the upper middle class and the like, to sit in these massive cabaret shows, have a nice meal while they watch nudie girls do dancing cabaret acts, and have intermittent shows in between. Good time guaranteed by all. And by 1950, that was normal in Paris because it had been going for nearly 100 years. You know, it had been 100 years of this sort of thing. People know things like, oh, the Moulin Rouge. But really, I mean, I went to the Moulin Rouge probably about, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. Spectacular show. They know how to do it. But these things weren't accepted over in countries away from France very easily because there was so much nudity, and a lot of these girls were really young, so it kind of like skirted the law in some senses and was not always welcome. And this would happen with this quelle folly. I speak French and I still have trouble saying that. I have some trouble saying some things in French. And when I say I speak French, well, I lived in France for a year and I speak enough to get by. So I'm not completely and utterly fluent. I can sing George Brassens. Non, ce n'était pas la radeau de la Méduse, c'est ce bateau qu'on se l'a dit au fond des ponts, dit au fond des ponts. Yeah, I can sing stuff like that, but doesn't necessarily mean I am fluent. So Folie Bergère production for London, and here in where are we again? We're in the Stage magazine. We're on the front page. It's April the 17th. The last one was June, so this is a few months later. They were further along with it, and something interesting is in here. James Lorry has arranged to bring the entire production of Aquelle Folie from the Paris Folie Bergère to London Winter Gardens early in June. Michael Giamaffi is coming over from Paris to direct a West End presentation of the show. In July, Mr. Lorry is going to Australia to present his wife, Rosina Reisbeck, on a 3-month concert tour, and in the autumn, he has plans of presenting an American opera star behind the Iron Curtain. Let me tell you, this is the years before, 3 years before. This is a year after Kissinger's nuclear war and foreign policy, and 3 years before the Herman Cahn's on thermonuclear war. This is peak Cold War. Everybody's crapping themselves. Spies are everywhere. You do not just go, no one just goes behind the Iron Curtain to introduce an American opera star unless they are connected with some sort of intelligence service. So instantly you have to be suspicious of where the intelligence links come in. What does first point happens when these young girls get introduced into these sort of sexually compromising positions, and then like a bit sexualized, and then suddenly they're working for intelligence and they're compromising people. How does that start? Where does that come from? And I found that very interesting. The person who's going to put on the show, and this show, if you're wondering why I'm speaking about this Aquelle Folie, oh, what birds, I think it translates as, is Mariella Cape's first real entrance onto the scene is with this. She appears in this show. And she's advertised as the center of the show. She's the one who's put out in the press. Pictures are taken of her. She's becomes known like this. And this is just prior to her ending up in Horace Dibben's as Horace Dibben's catch. And so she's got to be young, because she's 17 when she meets Horace Dibben in 1960. Work it out. I'm not sure about any of this. The officials and the follies. Changes have been ordered by the Lord Chamberlain's office in the Folies Bergère Review Aquelle Folie, due to open tonight at the Winter Garden Theatre, Drury Lane. Officials told the producer, Mr. James Lorry, that without the changes, the show would not be allowed to go on. He said last night, "We've made minor modifications, mostly concerning the nudes." So they came in as expected, literally on the day of the performance, and they said, "You're not doing nudes on stage. We are putting our foot down." And they always knew that would happen, but why were they there and what were they doing? And why don't we take a look at this young lady? Look at her. There she is. See what it says on the bottom? Mariella Capes. There she is. And this little vixen here would help bring down the British government and would end up in JFK's bedroom. That's quite interesting, isn't it? How it happens. And in this little piece is not that much talking about. We're going to go down to here, and they're talking. This is like this is the page is about, you know, what's it called? What's that actually called? Saturday page by Noel Whitcomb, and it's talking about what's going on in town. So the chorus girl blushed, and it's got a picture of Mariella Capes up there. And it says, "We were sitting alongside the stage when the cabaret began." Is this the thing going? No, no, no. It was a big show for the reopening of a new Latin quarter in London, and Dr. Lorenzo was sitting magnificently on the other side. Striptease. He certainly looked like a Hollywood version of Antigone. Antigone, who's mentioned in two of the other articles, hangs around in Esmeralda's barn, and is just like pumped around here all of the time, always mentioned. He painted two portraits of Queen Elizabeth, along with many other famous people. At the same time that Stephen Ward was sketching some of these people, he was painting them officially. Antigone, Pietro Antigone. When the chorus girls came on to genteel Edwardian striptease, he made a quiet remark to a Corrine called Mariella Capes, who was half dressed in coral pink negligee. All he said, so she told me afterwards, was, "What an attractive costume." But Mariella's face went as coral pink as her underwear. And I figured that this was the first time I ever saw a chorus girl's blush. This is it. It's just talking about this going out for a night on town, blah blah blah, and they come across Mariella Capes. Mariella Capes, of course. There she is, and she's a pretty girl. But there's something really weird about war and having enemies and having a paradigm like East versus West Cold War paradigm. You find that a lot of a lot of people on each side want to see naked pictures of the women on the other side. They all get constantly advertised that they're terrible, horrible, horrible people. And I think part of the reason her fame came later on is that she was kind of a Russian look, and her name, she went by the name Mariella Novotny. I think a lot of people were attracted to that because they were like, "Oh, that's the enemy. Oh, dirty," And that may sound silly, but I think that really does have like this underlying it has an element of it within a society that's a war with another society. Like on the Russian side, they're probably gawking over sexy Ukrainian girls, and on the Ukrainian side, they're currently searching for porn with Russian girls in. That happens. That's what goes on. That's how simplistic sexual man's mind works. So let's close some of these and let's get to this. So this is by August the 13th, 1958. It is written, "Folly girls punished for nightlife. Angry chorus girls of the Folie Bergère put their feet down last night, complaining that they're doing too much work. For a week, they have been doing extra rehearsals at London's Winter Garden Theatre as punishment, they believe. The producer, James Lorry, aged 39, ordered it after complaining that the girls were going to too many parties and getting too little sleep, that their dancing was suffering. Yesterday, pack drill was the last straw for the girls, as they do a matinee too," said 18-year-old Jennifer Ruddock from Peckham. "We're really on our knees." Last night, Mr. Lorry admitted, "Maybe I have been a bit too hard on them, but we have 100% effort when the show is in Paris, and I'm insisting on the same standard here. I can't stop the girls from going to parties, but I can't let the show suffer." So this is girls being naughty and having a good old time, and them being put in their place. And there is Mariella Novotny. There you go. And here it is. Another of Mr. D's Pygmalion girls. So here you go. Let's work it out. This is in the Sunday Pictorial, owned by the Mirror Group at this point, I think. I think the Pictorial is like an extension of, it's like a different version. You got the People, and then you got the Sunday Pictorial as well. And I think it doesn't last much longer. There's only a few more years after these sort of pieces that you see the Sunday Pictorial out there, but I can't quite remember that. Mr. D finds another Pygmalion girl. Yeah, and that Mr. D, who is it? Nightclub boss Dibben. He proposed to Mariella after 3 weeks before their first kiss. And here's Mariella Novotny. She already looks like she's grown a lot, doesn't she? So here she is in a nude cabaret in 1958, March 1958. And here she is after the hairdo and the glasses got bought in January 1960, a year and a half later. Okay. So, Club Boss to Waitress by Matt White. A wealthy, middle-aged nightclub boss who turned a 16-year-old grocer's daughter into the lioness of Mayfair society plans to repeat his Pygmalion performance. This time, he has chosen an 18-year-old dancing girl. She's an 18-year-old dancing girl. Wouldn't she have been 16 when she was performing on the... What date is this? So she's 18 now. She's 18, so she would have been 17. I thought so. She would have been 17 when she was doing nude dancing for the Mayfair set. Anyway, this time he's chosen an 18-year-old dancing girl, and this time he will marry his Eliza Doolittle before transformation. Before the transformation. Eliza, heroine of Bernard Shaw's play Pygmalion and the musical My Fair Lady, which is based upon it, was the daughter of a dustman. Experiment. As an experiment, she was trained to take her place in society. The man who is trying to do a Pygmalion in real life is Hod Dibben, 54, Belgravia, London, a businessman with a sharp eye for valuable antiques and pretty girls. Patsy Morgan Dibben, the girl who was the subject of his first experiment and added his name to her own, left him 3 years ago after he had made her into the hostess with the mostess in London's West End. Patsy's successor is blonde, Czech-born Mariella Capes. Dibben met her 6 weeks ago when he advertised for girls to work in his new Mayfair club in the Black Sheep. So here you go, mentioned again, Czech-born. It's already supplying, but she's still by Mariella Cape. She hasn't changed to Novotny. So that's still within the background. Whether she's telling the truth on that, who knows? Who knows? She's such a liar all of the time. It's so hard to know. You know, Mariella Novotny is a hard one. Don't even know if she's dead at the end of it. She could have just been lying about that too. Hard up. Mariella found that the club needed waitresses, not dancers, but she took the job because she was short of money. 3 weeks later, she was fired by Dibben's partner. She was so short-sighted, she was unable to see the customers trying to attract her attention. Weeping, she rushed to Dibben for consolation. Over a drink, he said he would like to marry her, if she would have him. Mariella stopped crying. "I will," she said. "I will." They had never kissed, never been out together, but the wedding was fixed for March. Then Dibben bought Mariella a pair of spectacles so she could see him properly. It's crazy. She blinked at him and took in his mutton chop whiskers and said, "I still love you, and I can't wait till March. Let's get married right away." So the date was brought forward to next Friday. I talked to Dibben in his Black Sheep Club about the plans for Mariella. "By giving her those glasses, I've opened up the world around her. he said. Mariella will tour hairdressers and beauty salons until we find a hairstyle and makeup which suits her best. She will be taught to sing. Her voice is good, but needs training, and there will be lessons in deportment and fashion. Dibben frowned. I gave her an antique lace shawl tonight, he said. When I told her it was 200 years old, she said, You can't afford a new one? Oh, hardy, ho, ho. These guys. Nightclub boss. Hod Dibben. There he is. Oh, he's a special one. Mariella Capes, Dibben's new Eliza, and his bride-to-be, holding the glasses he bought for her. By buying those glasses, I was able to help her see again. See the money that could be made being a lucrative sexual intelligence-led sexual compromise agent for the government. There you go. There's a couple of pictures, in actual fact, of her biting the tip of the glasses, another one of her looking coy as well. They went with this one. She was alluring and interesting, wasn't she? One interesting girl. I feel a bit sorry for her, of course. Let's close some of these up. I feel a bit sorry because she's as dead as a doornail. Drowned in jelly. Okay. So, and this is that it happened. January the 30th, 1960. So this was January the 24th. So literally within a week, there they are, pictured. The fantastically beautiful Horace Dibben. He's hard to, can't take my eyes off of you. Your gold face and yeah. Anyway, and Mariella Novotny. And what does it say? Mariella Novotny. By this time, she's about to start being called Mariella Novotny. Still called Mariella Capes. Bride of 18 moves into mansion. The beautiful bride is 18. The bewhiskered bridegroom is 54. Bewhiskered. I like that word. I'll keep that one for the future. Here, he gives her a kiss after their wedding yesterday in Caxton Hall, London. Mariella Capes was a nightclub dancer. Now she will live in a 40-room 16th century mansion near Petworth, Sussex, which was bought for her by her bridegroom, Horace Hod Dibben, wealthy antiques dealer and West End nightclub owner. By his previous marriage, Mr. Dibben has a son who is 12 years older than his bride. Now, that's the first time his son's mentioned in any of the newspapers. And there's a lot to be said by that, because it says he's a wealthy antiques dealer and West End nightclub owner, but by this point, he had been through two separate bankruptcies. One in the 50s, probably about 55 or something. I think it was 56, maybe earlier. And one later on in 1960, so just around this time. And I don't know how he kept his property, how he kept his money, how he managed to do all of this stuff when he was going bankrupt at the same time. It doesn't make any sense, of course, but nothing about Hod Dibben's life makes any sense. This guy who's gone bankrupt suddenly got loads of money, buying a mansion for his missus and all of this sort of stuff. It's all very suspicious indeed, and probably not true. There you go. Hey, long coming, long days. And here we are. We're in the Daily Mirror, Saturday, January the 30th, 1960. And there they are, the happy couple, Hod and Mariella. That picture is brilliant. She looks like the bride of Dracula, and it's stunning how he managed to be the one who we're just coming. Hired, fired, and wed. Here comes the bride who wed her boss after she was fired. She's 18-year-old ex-Follies nude Mariella Capes, pictured leaving Caxton Hall, London, yesterday with her husband, Mayfair Club owner Horace Hod Dibben, 54. Now, they call him a Mayfair Club owner there, of course. They don't call him an antique dealer. Some call him an art collector. Some call him a property redeveloper. Some call him the devil. Hod's partner sacked Mariella from the club where she was a waitress because she was so short-sighted she couldn't see the customers trying to attract her attention. Weeping, she rushed to Hod for consolation. He caught his eye. He proposed. That's it. Seeding you to think that this is real. This is normal. These guys are normal. These guys are normal. They're just hanging around together. Don't worry about it. Next to this, interestingly, stuff talking about the government, the Home Secretary, and these people would bring down the government, help bring down the government. These people would help to bring down the government. Very interesting. It's like that. So where are we now? Now this is interesting. February the 1st, so a couple of days after this news story about Hod Dibben marrying Mariella Novotny has gone around the world. It's been syndicated. It's everywhere. So here you see it's in Yuma Daily Sun and Arizona Sentinel in Yuma, Arizona. And this is just one of the many syndicated pieces I had, but I found this really interesting. Look at the headline. Psychological trick somewhat overdone. Now, read it. London, UPI. So that's Universal Press Institute or something, I suppose. Hod Dibben, 54, and Mariella Capes, 18, both laughed so hard to relieve tension at their wedding, the preacher was compelled to call a halt. This is a serious occasion. You'll have to leave if it doesn't stop, he warned. It stopped. So the preacher warns them about laughing and taking the mick out of the wedding, and this is published all around the world, all around the place. And the Yuma Daily Sun and Arizona Sentinel title it "Psychological Trick Somewhat Overdone." I find that a really interesting headline for them to use, but that's what they do. Let me close a couple of these again. Sorry, I have to do this. Sorry, I have to do that. And what I talk about a few things in this book. So one of the things I talk about, and look, she's only got 2 reviews, and it's got a 3-star. Basically, it gets about 3.5, 3.6 in most places, and the positive reviews are probably from people who don't know anything about the case, who don't realize that she got certain things wrong. Some of the things she got wrong, she says about Esmeralda's barn at one point, and she says it was originally run as a lesbian club, lied by a lesbian who died. It was found dead in her accountant's house. Lie. It wasn't. Esmeralda wasn't running as a lesbian bar. There's no evidence she was a lesbian at all. She was not found in the flat of her accountant. That's Barbara Knox Marsh, who died a year later on. Was found in her accountant's Baker Street flat of James McBurney, I think his name was. That's not Esmeralda Gulan, Esmeralda Noel Smith. So I found loads of points in Lillian Piccini's work that were erroneous. So, but she does have some quotes from different people in there that I've included within some of the articles. But I've also talked especially in the first article, about how she got things wrong. And so I'm not too surprised to see that the book probably wasn't well received online. I'm sure if you go online, if we put in Novotny papers, should we do this? Should we go and we search Google for the Novotny papers, and what we got, 3 out of 5, 3.6, 3 out of 5. I'm pretty positive most reviews will come up roughly 3.5 on Amazon. That's 3.6. I think what she did in her book was the Daily Mirror approach. She didn't do certain amount of, I don't even know how she could have mixed up Barbara Knox Marsh and Esmeralda Gulan. I mean, if she's got access to newspaper archives, how lazy is she to actually not bother properly looking at the information she's putting into a fucking book. I mean, into a book. If I was writing a book, and so I find it really intriguing. I find these things really intriguing. Now, here's lots of pictures of if you type in Mariella Novotny online, you get a lot of these different pictures. You see here's the Okel Folly pictures. So there's one, there's one by there, and that's her when she was Mariella Capes, and of course up here, and that's next one I want to show you here. Some of these are fantastic. I mean, really amazing, interesting to look at. Hod Dibben is just so out of place. That picture I love. He looks like a gangster there. He looks like the gangster he really is. It's quite impressive. So anyway, that is what we're talking about, Lillian Pizzacchini. And she writes for the Mirror, and the Mirror is, in my opinion, guilty of seeding all these people into the public narrative by writing stories that don't make any sense and just seem to be like, oh, let's put them out there and let's help the intelligence agencies do everything. Because I really do think that the Mirror back in the day was an intelligence agency tool and being used like it very often. So this is Lillian Pizzacchini, and this is her talking about femme fatale, spy and organizer of orgies for rich and powerful. Was Mariella murdered? Yeah, she probably was, but you're not going to find out any truth from Pizzacchini, are you? And this is really interesting. She's like, people like that are stuck around these characters, like who have been offed by intelligence services or seem to have been, who worked for intelligence for a long time, who openly admitted it and then died just afterwards. And then people going, "Ooh, was she killed by?" Lillian Pizzacchini writes lies in her books, says things that is not true, is you can verify is not true. And that makes me think that she's out there seeding information for someone like the Mirror. And who takes over the Mirror eventually? Well, Robert Maxwell, because it's always been a seedy den of wankers, hasn't it? That's what it is. It's a lying cesspool of the lowest form of journalism. And so I feel when I see her sitting there, Mariella Capes, it makes me really sad that she's going to go down this road, because all of these vultures, before, during, and after, before they're going to set her up for this fall, during they're going to sell her off, and she's going to have sex with all of these powerful men, and she doesn't even know why she's doing it anymore, during a time where they're doing psyops in all sorts of way, and it's deep Cold War activity happening, and then later she's going to be found drowned in jelly. It does not end well for this girl. Now, the other person I use a lot, or the person I use a lot in this last article to talk about, is wrote this book. So on page 93 here, let's remember we're on page 93. This is Stephen Ward's Scapegoat, written by Douglas Thompson. Now, Douglas Thompson has some errors in his work too. I have found some errors in Douglas Thompson's work, and it's really frustrating. When you are looking for source material, you're looking for people's quotes, and it's mixed in with a load of false information, that is really frustrating. But this is much better than Pizzacchini's Novotny files for accuracy. Now, if we go to where I was, we were on page 93. How close can I get? Oh, that's pretty close. And here you go. And I'm going to read you some of this. Let's go over here. I'm going to read you some of this. This is from Stephen Ward's Scapegoat. They all loved him, but when it blah, they killed him. It's such a stupid name for a book. Stephen Ward's Scapegoat would be well enough, but I mean, it's people trying to make it really interesting. So they talk about Ronnie and Reggie Cray, Billy Hill, Jack Spot. It was a delight. which made the twins euphoric when they acquired Esmeralda's club in Wilton Street. That's Esmeralda's barn. Not Esmeralda's club, even back then it's Esmeralda. This is what I mean. Just like mini errors, but also big mistakes. From Rachman, who had bought it in a quiet deal. Now, that quiet deal would have been from Horace Dibben or Billy Hill, more likely Billy Hill. The Gaming Act came into force 29th of July 1960, changing all games of chance and London too. Gangsters like Billy Hill and his rival Jack Spot had generated much of the income from spilers, illegal gambling clubs. Parliament believed legalizing gambling would drive away the criminal element, when it would clearly do the opposite. With a new Gaming Act in force, gambling in clubs was now legal, and the craze began to win at Esmeralda's. With its location, the membership, such as Bill Astor, Lord Derby, Teddy Sugden, who I talk about in this piece as well. He's a society abortionist, and John Pertwee, Doctor Who John Pertwee, I think. It would be like having their own bank. Just down the road from Harrods and around the corner from Buckingham Palace, some large cash arrangements were made, and Esmeralda's became a success. One of the early Parliament approved gangland establishments. Isn't that interesting? One of the early Parliament approved gangland establishments. I'd been away for a little time in Albany, recalled Bobby McHugh, and I went round Esmeralda's to see what it was all about. Ronnie Cray, who I knew well from Tangier, was full of it. Wanted to give me money from the till. Give him what's in there, he told the barman. Ron had no idea how much cash was there. 10 quid or 10,000. He did give me what was there. For the twins, the money was rolling in, much as it was over at the Black Sheep Club in Piccadilly on Whitehorse. On Whitehorse Street, run by Hod Dibben. Partner Mark Sykes knew most of the members, including Stephen Ward. I thought he was a very nice chap. He was very polite and always had lovely ladies with him. There wasn't much not to like about Stephen. He pursued his interests without any shame. As, of course, did Stephen Ward's close friend, Hod Dibben, who had 3 custom-made leather suits, 2 in black, 1 in faded red. He said the leather intensified the pleasure when he was caned, or preferably birched. It was so pleasant he didn't mind too much the chafing of the suit between the legs. It's not so bad if you use lots of talc. Johnson's baby powder is the best. Such a Hod Dibben line. Not so bad if you use loads of talc. Johnson's baby powder is the best. Horace Dibben. Quote of the century. The pink-bottomed Dibben was a charming raconteur of Whitehorse Street. He spoke highly of the teenager he married at Caxton on 29th of January 1960. She ties me to the chair in my leather suit, whips me, and then makes me watch her screwing someone else. Exquisite excitement, he announced, adding, I'm showering her with gifts. Nothing's too good for this wonderful girl. The only thing his bride, we'll call her Mariella for brevity, never got up close and intimate with was the truth about herself. Stella Capes, a.k.a. Mariella Capes, a.k.a. Mariella Novotny, a.k.a. Henrietta Chapman, is up there as a wonder of the world. She had a name for every season, a kink for all takers, an explanation for everything. That's amazing. I'm going to keep just reading this. I'll just finish off this last bit. The only thing that was consistent about Mariella, said Bobby McHugh, who knew her well, was that she wore the hat at all times. She never took it off. Once I was having a drink with this rather upper-class chap who told me he was meeting his girlfriend, Henrietta Chapman. Would I like to meet her? I thought nothing of it and went with him, and there was Mariella. I said, hello, Mariella. She smiled sweetly. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Henrietta. You're the third person this week to make that mistake. We must look very alike. She was superb. She was sitting there smiling and wearing the hat she'd been wearing the night before when I saw her stark naked at an orgy. She was a one. She was certainly special. She was meant to be the present of somewhere's daughter, but it was all bollocks. She was from Sheffield, but she had turned everyone on, everyone upside down. I'm going to end it with that. She turned everybody on. She turned everybody upside down. And I feel like really sorry for her. I feel really like emotionally sorry for her. Mariella Capes was a young girl who got mixed in with some really dark guys who convinced her to do some really crazy stuff. And it would be her downfall, it would be her end. She would never be able to live a normal life after 1961. She basically was in hiding. And eventually, in about 1977, she came out a bit, started talking to the papers. She wrote a book. She was obviously so scared to write the truth about what had actually happened. And she knew the people she was dealing with were so dangerous that she wrote like this weird fictional book that served no purpose and just seemed to be her screaming again, crying out to be listened to, without saying the words that she really wanted to say. Because I think, of course, she wanted to tell her story. And I think in 1977-ish, when she brought out that book, that made people in the establishment say, instead of saying, oh, look, she's keeping her end of the bargain and then not saying anything, that made members of the establishment say, she's a risk now. She's starting to write things down. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but when you start to say you've got information, you've got this, you've got that, it doesn't protect you. If these people want to kill you, they want to kill you. If you go completely silent and stay stum, you'll probably disappear off the radar and they'll leave you alone. But eventually, when she came out, it would only be like, and started talking again, it would only be about 3 years before she was dead, drowned in jelly. Hard knock life. So I'm going to leave you with something very special. This has been the NEWSHOUND today. It's a really strange one. I really enjoyed looking into Reginald Winterburn at the Four Winds Caravan Park in Thirsk. He was a boy, wasn't he? And interesting to look at all of these different people. And in the next installment of The Black Hand, we'll be looking at the original Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, my boys and girls, the original Jeffrey Epstein is really, really, really exciting. Because it really is the original Jeffrey Epstein. It will blow your mind clean open. I mean, the truth is wilder than fiction. People often say that. No one actually really realizes it. So I'm going to leave you with the second installment of the Hod Dibben set of Hod Dibben articles from 1962, as I promised in last time. Hod Dibben speaking about his adventures into Satanism, and I mean, I enjoy doing it. And I'm gonna there's another two pieces, so I'll do the other two pieces. Maybe I'll do them separately as a separate piece in between next week, because the following article in the series will be about the original Jeffrey Epstein, and that's a story in itself. It still includes a lot of the same characters. It will blow your mind clean open and make you go, what the hell's going on in the world? And at the end of it, you may just walk away with this much stronger feeling about everything being in cycles. Yeah, because that's what it is. Everything works in cycles. We're stuck in a cycle. So enjoy this. I hope you do. It's pretty funny. It made me laugh, so it'll probably make you laugh. And from me, Johnny Vedmore, you can find me at Funky Monkey. You can find me in the Limited Hangout. You can find me at johnnyvedmore.com. You can find me on YouTube and preferably Rockfin. And I hope you've enjoyed this NEWSHOUND. And I just want to say bye. Well, here we go. Thank you for joining me today. And we're going to go through the second of the Hod Dibben articles that appeared in the People newspaper in September 1961. This one's from the 10th of September. People newspapers on a Sunday, of course, only on a Sunday. So the previous one was on the 3rd of September, the next one on the 17th, and so on and so forth. That's the way dates work. 7 days in a week and all. So I'm gonna do a read through of this Hod Dibben article. Let me share my screen with you all. Share screen. And the article, I may have to change where my position is on the screen while I read this. The article is called My Death Warrant. And on top it says, Satan does not give up his slaves without a deadly struggle, as Hod Dibben found when he tried to renounce his life of evil. It came as I knelt in church to pray. So this was a double-page spread. This isn't hidden in the back pages. This was page 2. Apparently, in the Sunday bigger edition of a newspaper, Hod Dibben was page 2 and page 3. He was a page 3 girl. Yum 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 yum. It says, oh my God, it's all bombast, but it's brilliant. Hod Dibben, a quiet man from a respectable, God-fearing family, reveled for years in the vile orgies of black magic, until the night he attended the terrible ceremony of the girl and the goat. From that moment, he resolved to give up his life of evil. But it is not easy for a slave of Satan to escape his bondage. Threats of vengeance and death hounded him. Read the story of his escape from the devil and be warned. By Hod Dibben. I look forward. I mean, I did have a bit of fun on the first one, and I do expect to expand this a little bit. Hod Dibben's so interesting and quite amusing. So just before I start with this wonderful, I want to explain a little bit for those who haven't heard what happened in the first part. Hod Dibben is on the Isle in the town of Twat in the Orkney Isles, and got approached by a black magic woman after finding an egg nest with eggs in, with Nazi swastikas painted. I think they might be painted in blood, if I remember. And a load of strange happenings. And then he joined in the orgies of this black magic circle. And then he was in. And we continue from there. In the comforting sanctuary of my village church, I knelt in my pew to pray. And as my eyes were about to close in devotion, they lighted on a scrap of paper on the tile floor beside me. On it was a crude drawing of an inverted cross and the severed head of a cockerel. One glance was sufficient to tell me it was my death warrant. I stole a swift glance around the silent church to see who might have put the paper there, but there was nobody, save the regular members of the congregation kneeling in prayer. With my heart pounding in fear, I quickly finished my prayers, hurried from the church and raced home. There I spread out the piece of paper and examined it closely. Beneath the drawing were the words, "You cannot hide. Your life is in Satan's hands." It confirmed my dread. The Brotherhood of Satan had caught up with me and intended to take my life. For 2 years, I had been an elder in the Brotherhood of the Evil Black Magic Circle, which I had joined when I was an RAF officer in the Orkneys. Sorry, I might giggle in this. I took vows which bound me to the service of Satan for the rest of my life. I promised to do evil instead of good, to sneer at purity, to worship obscenity. And I was true to those vows. Faithful, I took part in the brotherhood of every kind of debauchery and filth. And I am ashamed now to admit that I did all of this with intense pleasure and exhilaration, until one night, one terrible night, the horror of which I can never erase from my memory. That was when the Brotherhood decided to honor a special date in the devil's calendar by offering a human sacrifice. I tremble to this day as I recall the sight of a young girl, her slim, naked body silhouetted against the moonlit sky on an Orkney hillside. Bloodshed. A few yards from her was a fully grown ram, its eyes blazing, its body tensed and straining at the tethering rope which was tied around its gleaming horns. The ghostly, hooded spectators on the hillside waited in excitement until the hour of climax. Then, when the moon had reached its height, a tall figure in a white robe stepped forward and released a maddening ram with a quick knife slash of the rope. There was a scream. Ah! Then deadly silence, and the girl's blood flowed into the heather. She did not die, but it was indeed a human sacrifice, for I knew that she would always bear the scars on her mind and the body of the terrible ravaging encounter on the hillside. Her parents was among the hooded spectators of the ghastly ritual. Up to that moment, there had been few members of the Brotherhood more enthusiastic than I, and I really believed that the odd circumstances which had drawn me, a member of the respectable, wealthy, highly religious family, into the cult were the workings of some supernatural force. But this sickening spectacle jerked me back into my senses at last. I resolved to have no more to do with black magic. I renounced my satanic vows and promises. I would turn my back on evil and start life afresh. I made that decision in full knowledge of the dreadful threat and the warnings the Brotherhood constantly sounded against traitors. But I knew I was leaving the Orkneys and returning to England very soon, and I was confident I would be safe from reprisal there. I underestimated the long arm of satanic vengeance. Only 2 days after I left the Orkneys, as I was driving to my home near Southampton, I pulled up at the traffic lights in Basingstoke, and suddenly I heard a rustle of paper at my side. I turned my head in time to see a piece of paper fall through the open car window onto the passenger seat. Sign number 2. I pulled into the curb and grasped the paper. 7 words were scrawled on it in blood, which was still wet. Your life is in our hands. Beware. A joke, or a sinister message delivered by an agent of the Black Circle, which I had deserted. After a moment's pause, I threw the note away contemptuously, certain that no harm could befall me. For a whole year there was silence. I settled down in my lovely home, my lovely old home, and began to make a name for myself as a connoisseur of arts and antiques. I did my best to forget Satan and his evil and conducted my life with the utmost Christian purpose. In an endeavor to atone for my sinful past, I read the Bible each morning, as I had been taught to do as a child, and each Sunday I attended divine service. The horrible message which I found on my pew was the last thing I expected, but there was no mistaking its meaning. I did not have long to wait for the next sign of vengeance, of the vengeance forces that were closing in on me. It came in the form of a small square parcel, tied with white tape, that arrived with my mail in the next morning at my antiques business in Southampton. No clue. Inside, wrapped in a tuft of cotton wool, was an antique silver ring bearing a skull and crossbones. There was no covering letter enclosed, no clue to who sent it. I was puzzled, but perhaps, I thought, the sender would ring up about it later. Then, suddenly, the feeling came over me that I had seen the ring somewhere before. I picked it up and examined it closely with an eyeglass. Inside the ring, just discernible, were some initials and the name Dibben. Then I remembered. At my father's house was a picture of my great-grandfather. and a skull and crossbones ring could be clearly seen on his finger. I hurried to show my father the ring. He was astonished and visibly shaken at the sight of it. "Where did this come from? It can't be the same," he gasped. With trembling lips, he told me that the ring had been treasured possession of my great-grandfather and had been buried with him on his death. The hallmark and the name inside the ring convinced my father it was the same one. "But how can this be?" he stammered. "I don't understand." I tried to allay his fears, but saying it must all be a huge coincidence. But in my heart, I was convinced it was the same ring, that it was the supernatural forces of black magic at work. And I knew it was meant to be yet another warning to me of my imminent death. On my way home, I called into the Pensioners' Arms in Southampton for a drink to settle my nerves. As I stood at the bar, I became aware of a stranger eyeing me intently. When he saw I had noticed him, he finished his drink quickly and left. I took no further notice and quietly continued my drink, leaving about 10 minutes later. By now it was dark. As I crossed the road outside the public house, a large black saloon car came hurtling round the corner, straight towards me. I just managed to jump clear. The car sped by. I caught a momentary glimpse of the driver's face. It was a stranger who had been watching me at the bar. Satan's servant had failed this time. I said a silent prayer of thankfulness, but knew that it would not be the last attempt on my life, and I fell into a panic of anxiety. I began to suspect that at the least sound. I jumped when the postman knocked at the door. I didn't even dare cross the street without taking elaborate precautions. At night, I bolted all the doors and windows and kept a truncheon under my pillow. You sure that was a truncheon, Hod? Finally, I became so frightened that I decided to take the coward's way out and rejoin the Brotherhood of Evil to save my skin. It was a terrible decision. It was a terrible decision, taken at the height of my efforts to atone for my past wrongdoings and accept a Christian way of life. A caller. But I felt a fatalistic conviction that once one embraced the cult of evil by dabbling in black magic, one was in the clutches of Satan forever. I set out to discover if there was an active black magic coven near my home. I soon found one at Ringwood in the heart of New Forest. I went down there one day and lunched at a restaurant in the town. I tipped the waitress generously and mentioned casually that I had heard of some unusual ceremonies in the forest. She gave me the name of a person who might have some information. He turned out to be an aged jobbing gardener who lived in a cottage on the edge of the forest. At first, he would say little, but after 10-shilling note had passed hands, he told me about the clearing in the woods from which singing and dancing could be heard at night when the moon was full. I returned home, determined to pay a visit to the spot at the next full moon. That night the telephone rang at home. A voice said, "Stay, Brother Hod, and prepare to make peace with the master." I asked who was calling, and the line went dead. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Standing there was a man in clergy's clothes, a black trilby hat, clerical collar, and black raincoat. My fears were allayed by his kindly voice. "I decided it was time I made your acquaintance, Mr. Dibben," he said. "My name is Mizran." Come on. Stunned, he held out his hand and I shook it warmly. So my visitor was merely one of the local clergy. I was glad to see him. He had a cheery manner, and he stayed chatting for some minutes before taking his leave. As I saw him to the door, I remembered I had not asked which church he was from. He answered, "I am sent by the Master Hod." He gave a nod of his head, replaced his black hat, and was gone. I was stunned. For several seconds I leaned weakly against the doorpost. Then, trembling, I returned to my chair in the sitting room for another shock. In the chair lay yet another note. It read simply, "You will return." The note was written on the same kind of child's exercise book paper as the other messages I had received. This time, however, there was no threat. Obviously, it was confidently expected I would return to the fold. On the night of the next full moon, I drove to Ringwood, and I waited until darkness before making my way on foot into the forest. I looked around, but could see or hear nothing of a black magic gathering. After a few minutes, stumbling through the darkness of the undergrowth, I decided to turn back. Suddenly I was aware of movements around me and the flashing of torches. By the flickering lights, I could see that I was surrounded by figures in the familiar Ku Klux Klan hoods and cloaks. Not a word was spoken. I said in a voice hardly more than a squeak, "I'm Hod. I've come back." There was not a word in reply. The figures came towards me, their torches wavering and flickering against the rustling leaves. Weird shadows were cast, and I became afraid. My voice rose to a shriek. "Say something, can ya?" The figures in the swishing cloaks continued to advance. Blinded by the lights from the torches, I put my hands to my eyes, and I rushed madly away from them. Ah! I brushed against the lowly bough of the tree, grazing my face. I fell headlong against a strand of barbed wire, tearing my trousers and cutting my leg. I plunged through the blackness, and gradually my pursuing tormentors were left behind. Thankfully, I arrived safely on the main road and quickly drove my car to my home, to my wife, who still knew nothing of my guilty black magic secrets. I explained my ragged appearance by saying I had a brush with a couple of drunks. Ooh, a star. After my adventure in the forest, the threats of the Brotherhood grew more vicious. The notes with their grotesque drawings were followed by persecution by telephone. Sometimes the phone rang a dozen times in a night. Each time the voice would say, "We'll get you, Dibben," or "You haven't much longer to live." The calls were obviously from uneducated louts who had been hired to do dirty work of the leaders. At least the tactics were reduced to human level that I could understand. I began to hope that any further threats or attempts on my life would take the form of a beating up. I was tall, well built, and strong. As a youth, I had quite a reputation as an athlete. Even though I was well into my 40s, I felt more than a match for anybody who attacked me with two fists. But the insidious mental and spiritual persecution continued, and the threats came uncannily true. One day, I received a phone call from a man with a cultured voice who reminded me of the day years before when a hideous future was forecast for me if I renounced the black magic circle. I confess. Among the events predicted was the sudden death of my father and my virtual exclusion from his will. Both those things happened. My father and I had never been close friends, mainly because I did not agree with the severe principles he adopted as a member of the Plymouth Brethren. He considered me much too worldly for his highly religious household. Nevertheless, as the elder son, I was his heir, and I had no doubt that I would become rich man under his will until one day in 1950. He called me into his home and told me he had received a mysterious phone call mentioned that skull and crossbones ring. The caller said that I was to be punished for my wanton behavior, and that the similar fate was in store for other members of the family unless they openly rejected me. I had no alternative but to confess to my father all about the evil connections with black magic cults. I tried to explain that I had been a victim of circumstances which drew me almost unwillingly into the circle, but he was terribly upset and would not listen. Cut in the will. The sinister phone call and my confessions made him very ill and convinced him that he was about to die. In his strange state of mind, he decided that the best way to make his peace with his maker was to make me pay for my past sins. There and then, he made a codicil to his will, which had the effect of cutting me off. And with startling suddenness, after that move, he was stricken with a heart attack and died at the age of 69. Apart from bouts of asthma, my father was strong and healthy, with many years of life apparently ahead of him. The second phase of the black magic warning quickly came true when my father's will was read out, showing that he had left more than £150,000. It was revealed that although I was to share the estate with my brother, certain conditions were made in my case that meant I would receive next to nothing. My father had stood guarantor for me when I borrowed large sums of money to develop my antique business. His will made no provision for the continuance of that guarantee. That meant I immediately had to pay back all the loans, which swallowed up my share of the will after death duties. For a long time afterwards, I faced financial ruin, before my affairs were finally put in order. Yet, strangely, I do not blame my father. I am convinced that his altering of his will was following the mysterious phone call was the work of the devil. Divorce. The manner of my father's death and my suffering under the will were exactly what had been forecast by Cicera, the high priestess of black magic circle in Scotland many years before. Everything she foretold came to pass, including the breakup of my marriage, which had lasted 23 years. When my wife sued me for divorce, a situation of my own making, it was further proof of the extraordinary influence that was being exerted by unseen powers. Further terrible consequences of my betraying my master Satan and withdrawing from black magic were yet to come. There was the tragic car crash in Italy, which killed one of my best friends, an event which I knew would happen, but was powerless to prevent. That's it. That's it. And as you saw halfway through, we skipped through it. It says, next week, Hod's guest sleeps in a haunted room and is horribly mutilated. Hod utters a black magic curse and a man dies. People newspaper, everybody. So what were the adverts? I like the adverts last time. Sometimes there's some pictures. So here you go. There's Hod holding this skull and crossbones ring that apparently his grandfather was buried with. Apparently that's what happened. Yeah. Small wonder that Dibben was terrified by the mysterious arrival of the skull and crossbones ring. It had been buried on his great-grandfather's finger. Now, what nonsense. What nonsense. What nonsense. Silly nonsense. Oh, look, it's an advert for Coronation. Coronation Street looks better on a Murphy Astra. You can't see Coronation Street, which is a British soap. You can't see it on this television because the newsprint's so bad. You just got to believe what they're saying there. Here's another versigram. The 13 letters of 4 consecutive words in the verse. Very interesting to put it on this page. 13 this, 13 that, just saying. Your chance to make a better living of normal things that came up. So sneezing a cold, Beecham's powder, Beecham, who would soon be merged with Glaxo. Well, actually, SmithKline, and then with Glaxo eventually. Golden Virginia tobacco gives you more tobacco value. Yeah, I used to smoke that stuff. Ugh. Right, and all that new Sandrian. What's that about? Floor covering. Oh, what a wonderful, some lino. Excellent. I always like to see what is actually going on these pages, but there you go. Death warrant. I'm going to come out of the screen share here. Stop share here. Right. I hope you enjoyed that. That was the second part of Hod Dibben in the people writing about his time in the Brotherhood of Satan. This black magic circle he says he was in. Of course, and he's claiming he became good again, and he lost and he became good again. And this is obviously, a lot of this is just ways to excuse all the man in the mask rumors and the satanic style parties that he was throwing. There were sex compromise operations, and to draw people who like this sort of stuff, because this stuff was popular at that time, especially horror movies. People don't realize that in the, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you would go to like these horror double bills at the cinema. So you go to the cinema and you'd watch 2 movies in a row, or 3 movies sometimes in a row, and spend the whole day in the cinema, eating popcorn, messing about, being scared at horror movies. So like they used to do Hammer horror double bills and stuff, and you'd go and watch 2 movies. So horror was a new thing that was coming around, and it quite captured the imagination because it was quite a trend and a fad and meant for adults. It meant that the other trend fad meant for adult could be classed as adult entertainment, would be pornography and things like that. So they merged quite well, and the idea that there was satanic black magic circles running around, and they were real, and they were really worshipping the devil, and all of this stuff was happening. Now, all the embellishments on these stories are just that, they're embellishments. What these most of the time were a load of weird adults who were reading out of books and having sex with each other. And that attracted other weird adults who like to have sex or like to read books or like esoteric sort of like supposedly pseudo-spiritual stuff, psychobabble. Which most satanic stuff is just psychobabble, carefully worded sentences, and people going, "Oh, I'm going to worship this, and it's going to make this happen." Which then, when things happen, they attribute those things to the thing that they're doing to make things happen. Of course, that's what anybody would do, isn't it? It's what you would do. It's what I would do. And the opposing force, of course, is the church. And he acts like, "Oh, I'm the church and Satan," and they try and mix it all up. And a lot of this time, there's a lot of people doing lots of really evil stuff. So at the same time, it becomes like anything evil that comes out is suddenly, oh, well, maybe he's a Satanist, and then it becomes ridiculous. It becomes Hod Dibben. And that's what Hod Dibben was really good. That's why his sexual compromise operations worked really well, because he would make the factual stuff look completely ridiculous by linking it with all of these different things like Satanist black magic circle. And this is part of the satanic panic. This was intelligence operations happening. Hod Dibben had many links with intelligence operations. Mariella herself said later on that she worked for intelligence agencies, so understand what they're doing. And this is why we're going to look through it, because now when you read that, it's ridiculous, of course, but you can see the bigger picture. He was this person, he was organizing these parties, he was trying to excuse behavior and attract people to this sort of like trend and fad, and that's very interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that, and stay tuned. There's 2 more to go, and then there may be some more, but we'll talk about that another time. For me, Johnny Vedmore and NEWSHOUND, bye.
Having a great reset for the post-corona era.